Hello and welcome back to Audio Pong. How's everyone doing? I hope you're all doing good on the other side. Marko, today we have a special guest, the magnificent Dave Gordon.
That's right. Dave Gordon, man. He's in the house. And it's a
So,
pleasure.
we've been working with Dave at Medieval Times for quite some time, and he doesn't really say much about his personal life. It seems like, but he seems like a very interesting
He
person. I've
does,
really wanted
yeah.
to get to know him a
He's the
little
kind of
more.
person that I would say, every time you ask him a question, he's got an intelligent answer, but he never boasts. I never heard him really talk about himself or gloat. And maybe that's what we're going to try to get him to do today for us. So we can see if he's like an international spy or what he does.
Man of mystery.
A man of mystery. But why don't you start, Dave, by telling our audience a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself.
Okay, my name's David, or Dave Gordon. I live in Bartlett, Illinois. I am on my second marriage to my beautiful wife, Molly, who will celebrate with me 23 years of marriage this July.
Oh, congratulations.
Why, thank you very much. We Brady Bunched 3 kids, so I had 2 kids from my first marriage, and she had a son from her marriage, and so we're now a combined blended family of 5. The girls are about to turn, let's see, they're going to be 34, I think, this year. Yeah, I think, and they're both getting married this year. Whee! So I'm going to sell a kidney, and then we'll be okay.
Then you'll have money.
Yeah. And Zachary, my stepson, lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He is a filmmaker and a cinematographer. So
I didn't know you had a stepson named Zach.
Yes, as a matter of fact. Only he leaves
CH?
off the H. His H is not only silent, it's invisible.
It's invisible. Oh, so he's he's CAC.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always thought the H was weird.
Well, yeah, it was like, if I'm going to take off the Ari, why not take off the H as well? But anyway, so yeah, I'm old and inappropriate. Till I'll turn 60.
Were you ever young and inappropriate?
Well, I was then. Yeah, I've always pretty much been inappropriate. But yeah, I'll turn 66 in the fall. And carry a couple of jobs. I work at U.S. Bank as a software trainer during the day, telecommuting, working from home. And so we run webinars, we develop training content and such. And then I've also, like you guys said, work at Medieval Times.
So when you teach, is it like a video series, or is it more of like a personal, like what you would in a class?
You know what it is? It's a particular product that the bank offers to those in the freight industry. So shippers and carriers, the truck drivers, and the people who need the boxes moved. And it's a product the bank offers, and I train the new users on how to use the software. So it's done on a webinar type of basis over the internet.
So it's an IT job. That's what I'm trying to get into. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I spent 25 years in mortgage banking IT before I decided to enter the training. So, yeah,
totally. You see, that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, so let's go back in time a little bit. I want to know, first about your acting career. When did you start with that? Were you always an actor as a kid?
High school senior year, I got into doing drama at my high school level, and I did 3 plays in 1 year, so that was kind of cool, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, wow.
And I've been pretty much in the theater on and off since then, so God, that's a lot of years. But yeah, I started in high school. I went to college at Southern Illinois University to study aviation technology. I was going to be an airline pilot. That was my big dream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
how far did you get along in the classes for that?
About 1.5 years, and there's a kind of a accompanying story with it. So the goal was this plan that I set up as a junior in high school to become an airline pilot, but I was going to go into this program that Southern offered at the time. It was 2 years of a aircraft and power plant, basically the mechanics license that you get from the FAA. They had another year and a half of aviation electronics to get a certificate in that. And then a few gen ed classes, and you ended up with a bachelor's of science in the specialization of aviation technology. But the plan besides that was to join Air Force ROTC. So when I graduated, I'd go in and be able to fly for the Air Force. And everybody wanted to fly fighters. And I was like, no, give me big, slow jets. I want to be an airline pilot. I just need those hours that I'll never be able to afford on my own. So that was the plan.
Right.
And you might have noticed I have on glasses. And the wonderful thing that happened for the world and kind of rotten for me was the Vietnam War ended. So all these pilots that were in the Air Force that had perfect vision came home. And so the pilot slot that was originally intended for me became a navigator slot, which really wouldn't get me into the airlines the way I wanted to. So I was left without my big plan that I'd set up 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Have you pursued piloting since then? Do you fly like casually or recreationally?
No, I had dreams of it. I was always, again, that costs a lot of money too, getting a private pilot's license.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it can be like 100,000, right? It's quite up there.
It's been so long since I even looked at it, I would have no idea, but I wouldn't doubt it'd be $100,000 if you're buying those hours on your own.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, I got out of that and decided, well, I better go home because I'm spending a lot of money here at Southern and not studying anymore. But in the time that I realized that I lost my pilot slot, I was like, well, I'm not going to continue this career. I don't want to be a mechanic either. So I was still on my lease in college and the remainder of the time. And so I started doing theater at Southern Illinois. And I wasn't a part of the program. Yeah, I wasn't part of the program, but there's always MFA students who need actors to do their plays. I got seen by a couple of people who asked me to do their shows. And so I spent about the last 6 months in college doing theater and then came home and decided I was going to be an actor.
And so when I talk to other actors, there's always a special role I feel like most actors really like to play. Like it seems to me like kindly people, gentle people always want to play villains. Like it's a chance to just, flip the card, so to speak. Are you like that? Do you really like playing a villain? Or is it a different type of role character?
On stage, I don't think I've ever played a villain, honestly. I never gave that much thought. I think it's always sounded like it would be fun.
You played Sweeney Todd, right? I wouldn't call him a villain, but he's definitely an anti-hero kind of character.
Well, see, and maybe that's the conundrum for actors. It's like, if I'm playing somebody who's absolutely horrible, what I have to do is make them approachable and relatable to an audience in some way, or they just don't care. They just hate him, right? So I always saw Sweeney as tragic more than evil. And but that's a good point. Because I did play Sweeney. That was one of my bucket list roles. So I was like, great, you cast me. Wonderful. Let's do the show. Now I can die because all my bucket list roles are done. Not really.
That just means you got to create more bucket lists.
But yeah, so that's a really cool perspective that I never really thought about. He's horribly evil, but I never pictured him that way.
Well, I mean, especially with media today, we have a lot of anti-heroes in film. Like, take Deadpool, Morbius, you got Venom, all these, like, literal anti-heroes.
Sure.
But I don't know. I can't think of any films.
There also seems to be, don't you feel like a lot of villains are becoming sort of like heroes now because their stories are being rewritten to be sort of like they were misunderstood. They were never bad.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Especially in Marvel. Marvel does that a lot. Like, even Dr. Doom, he's treated as almost a good guy now. He's like, he's actually doing all this for the good of his people.
That's so strange to me.
He's just like, I know. No, Doom is like, it's in his name, Doom. But like, he's portrayed as kind of like this guy who just cares about his people and he wants to promote the ultimate prosperity for them. And
they just turned it into patriotism, like.
Yeah, but they do
just
that.
Sort of harsh
DC
patriotism.
did that with Black Adam, who's Shazam's
But that well,
villain.
that was the example. Like watching the trailer and reading about, because obviously we're comic book fans. Are you a comic book fan, Dave? Are you interested at all in like Marvel character stuff like that?
No, I'm so out of touch with it. I hear names and
Well, what do you? Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. I respect it. Oh my God, what a business! And I saw some of the films, but yeah, I've never been MCU, and then I got to the universe, and I kind of went, okay, it's over my head.
So how do you feel then about like fantasy characters in general? Like when you take roles, or do you prefer roles that are about real people or are more realistic, or are you like where do you stand on that as far as like fantastical characters and whatnot?
That's a good question because it's kind of interesting at this point. I've tried in a couple of times in my life to go ahead and pursue acting as a career, as a main career. And then I realized that I had this pesky habit of liking to eat, and I
Hmm.
procreated. So it was like, yeah, I can't live in a 1-bedroom studio with a bathroom down the hall and live on ramen. Um,
Yeah.
so I had to pursue other avenues and just keep my hand in theater where I could. So I would still pursue roles that I really wanted to play and try and get them. Man of La Mancha is one that I've never been able to do. Don Quixote that I would love to. That's still on the bucket list. So I'm not
I
dead
love
yet.
Don Quixote. Yeah.
Ah, what a character. Um, and the interesting thing about that play to me always was that it's generally portrayed by somebody young who ages themselves to become Cervantes. And
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point.
so playing it as an older person, it would be like, okay, well, gotta either darken this up or lose it. But you know what I mean? I mean,
Well, it was played recently by an older gentleman, by an older actor, wasn't it? In a movie adaptation.
yeah,
I can't
yeah.
remember his name. He's a well known actor. He's I think an English actor. I can't remember his name, but he was in movies like Brazil and Tomorrow Never Dies, James Bond
Hmm.
film. He played the main villain. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but
And
I agree with you. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like it's always played by a younger, even Johnny Depp, who's in the news a lot right now. He played sort of a weird version of Don Quixote.
mhm.
And that is strange. That's a really I don't know. Just to me, that's a really good point because he's an old character. So why do they keep casting young? I guess because he's supposed to be so romantic and suave and sort of you know debonair, even
Well,
though
I
he's
mean,
kind of crazy.
yeah, I mean, the story of Cervantes is, he's a prisoner and he's entertaining the prisoners and about the story of this hero. So he has to become it, and that's kind of the
Mm,
conceit of the play.
hmm.
But yeah, I would pursue roles, but as I got into these other careers to be able to like pay a mortgage and buy insurance, I was able to just kind of keep my hand in and begin to even now really go for either the bucket list roles that we've talked about or something that I'm requested to do. Um, but I'm not actively pursuing parts just saying, "Oh, I want to go audition for that or I want to go audition for this." Um, for a number of reasons, one of which is I've got a pretty good job at Medieval Times, which takes up as much time as I would probably be at rehearsals. And when I've been at Medieval Times and done shows like 1776 or Sweeney Todd, it's been lucky that they've been able to adjust my performance schedule so I could still do rehearsals because those are
That's always
generally
good. Yeah.
3 to 4 nights a week. But I'd still be able to like do a weekend evening show or a Sunday show when there aren't generally rehearsals scheduled.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you pursued it. You pursued acting as a full time gig. Can you talk about that? Like, what was your game plan with that? What did you try? What did you succeed at? What did you fail at with trying to be a full time actor? What does that even mean to someone like me, who can just dreams about it but hasn't really pursued it?
Well, the business has changed so much from when I was doing that. When I was doing that, your modus operandi was you had to get headshots, you had to have a resume, and then you began mailing your headshot and resume to talent agencies who got thousands of them. So they would take a look at your resume like, oh, okay, there's lines on it. They'd look at your picture and go, Can I book him? I can't book him. I don't know if he's any good. I'll find out if he's any good if I look at him and go, yeah, I could possibly book him. And then the remainder of your time, you would go generally once a week. I believe it was Wednesdays, and just hang out at the agencies. I'm brought in some more headshots, brought in some more resumes. Got anything for me? Just to get FaceTime with the video. Everything now is a submit a video submission. And that was even before COVID, when it kind of became, yeah, we don't want you anywhere near us. Just send us a video. But even before that, it had changed. It had become more digital, which is cool. Headshots are still expensive, although there are more and more people with the skills now to be able to produce a decent headshot for you. But it's one of those types of things. It's a card brochure.
I was just gonna agree with you. Right. Yeah.
It's really a card brochure.
Especially with the digital.
That's kind of cool. There's tips they say about your headshot picture. Make them wonder what you're thinking about in that picture. It just hooks. And
like the Mona Lisa smile.
There you go.
Kind of like put some kind of allure on your face.
Yeah. So it's, they take hundreds of shots if you've got a good session, and then you start picking through these and sifting through these, and my eyes are a little more open in this one versus that one, and it's exhausting. And you also have to remember that, one, you're going to deal with a whole lot of rejection, and you have to remember that it's not personal. It's truly one of two things. Either that casting director has a vision of what they want that person to look like in this production, and you ain't it. Not your fault. You were born that way.
Right.
Or you come in and you do your monologues and you do your audition, and you're basically saying, this is the type of table I build. And they go, it's probably a sturdy table, but I don't like that table. It's like, okay, it's your product. So in the end, what I realized as a professional actor, at that time anyway, was the job was auditioning. Your work is going to auditions. The paid vacation is actually getting cast.
That's an interesting way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, but the job is auditioning, and anybody that thinks it isn't is either really well connected in whether it's parental or, in the business already or different things, or started when they were 4, or they're just ungodly talent. And everybody else.
So when you send in a headshot and resume, is it for a particular role or is it for a particular production?
No,
is it like kind of like, do you just send your and they just see if they can fit you in anywhere, or is it like?
Yeah, well, again, if it's going to an agent, they're pretty much like, okay, can I sell this person? What's different about this person, or where could I see this person fitting in? And there's even themes of headshot series. You might have your commercial shots. You might have your theatrical shots. You might have your business shots or your print ad shots. So, you're in there in your plaid shirt like me with a hard hat on, for that print ad. Because it's the business itself isn't just being on a stage. It's doing television, it's doing commercials, it's doing print ads, it's doing industrials where you'll go and be a spokesperson at a booth back when they used to actually still have conventions and such. So, as a
really,
performer,
they would hire actors for conventions.
Oh, yeah. And all of them went for it because, again, you're working job to job. The minute you get a job and you're hired and getting paid to do a theatrical production or some kind of production, the next day, if not that afternoon, you're looking for your next gig. So
is it a bit of a snowball effect where you get one role, the next role is kind of easier, or is it just the same thing? It's always the same amount of difficulty to get the next role.
Again, it depends how connected you are. The thing I used to say is I was pretty vanilla. Even when I was younger, my look wasn't particularly, oh, he looks Mediterranean, or he looks rugged, or it was just like, oh, he's a guy. So there's probably 5 of me in this auditioning group. And the casting director has worked with that one before and liked the experience. Why are they going to take a risk on me? I look the same.
Right. Especially if you didn't become more expensive or, right.
Well, yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
I could be hiding some horrible, disfigurement or some drug, addiction or whatever, and they don't know me from Adam, but they know that guy, and they've worked with him before, and he was solid.
Are you familiar with the term ego exhaustion?
I'm not sure I've ever heard it placed that way, but
It's something that I bring up, I guess, kind of often.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times.
I'm kind of tying in our next episode here a little bit because we're going to be doing a future episode about personal interactions, like
cues and
social cues, and how a person's charisma and something like that. And obviously, actors and actresses in general have a lot, I would say, maybe copious amounts of charisma. But ego exhaustion is about wearing out your personas, right? And then returning to yourself, whatever you are at your base, whatever the sub level is of Dave Gordon, that's what you return to in your quiet moment, right? When you're left alone, you don't have to worry about or think about what you're saying because someone else is present, or how you look, or how you're acting. And we have different personas. The idea is that we have different personas for the groups of people we're around or engaging with, right? Whether
Sure.
it's a significant other, or it's people at work, or maybe a million people at a food festival or something. So ego exhaustion is when that becomes too much and it wears you out, and you can no longer perform those personas. And I always felt that is something that we all deal with, but actors especially, they're really sort of trying to build up their endurance for ego exhaustion, if that makes sense. They're trying to create personas that can last a really long time. Does that make sense for how you approach a role, or how you build up a character when you take a role? Or do you what's your method for that? How would you say that applies to you at all? Even at, say, your current job, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it kind of places me in the mindset of when I go into an audition, what am I looking for? So, especially if it's a stage production and it's something I'm familiar with,
Right.
there'll be a persona that I could put on for that. One of my favorite roles was playing John Adams in 1776. So he's basically in
Yeah.
the film or play. He's pretty much obnoxious and disliked, but fiery in his devotion and commitment. One of his big words is commitment. And so there's an attitude I think I bring onto the stage about it, but it's still me. But there's that sense of, who is this person that I'm trying to portray? And a lot of times that's hard, because if you're going into a cold reading, or you've only seen sides or those little cuttings from the script, and you're not familiar with the piece, then it's pretty much they literally say it cold read, because it is. You're kind of like, oh, okay, that's what I'm taking from this. The director may have a totally different vision of what that person is thinking and being and saying at that time. So I try and go in, as close as I can attend to what it is. And if I have time to prep, that's obviously easier. If I'm walking into something cold or I'm not familiar with it, then it's pretty much that, okay, is it improv? Not really. It's more along the lines of trying to be perceptive.
Is that more exciting to have a cold read, or would you prefer to prepare? Would you rather be surprised?
Depends on the role. What I would be going for. Luckily, I felt that if I was okay at anything, it was cold reads. I could pretty much be perceptive on the text or the prose, but not all the time. I've crashed and burned on those. So it's really hard to say which is easier. On the one hand, there's no prep, so if I'm really busy and I'm walking into a cold read, I'll see it when I see it. But on the other hand, you're also building up some, whether you want to or not, you're going to be building up that want for that role. When I was just auditioning and auditioning for, okay, I've got this call and that call and this call, I'm going to go to that one and this one and that one. You don't have a whole lot of time to prep. And you're also not getting that attached to it, because it's, I need a guy who's 25 to 35, who's about this height, who has this in his background. You go, oh, okay, I can kind of relate to that. So you're walking in, but you're honestly like, yeah, I didn't get it. Oh, well, move on. Job's auditioning, always remember.
Yeah.
But if you're really attached to it, I think that prep brings it more. And then you do have that desire. And in the end, if you don't get it, a little harder disappointment. So I'm torn on what it would want to be, because especially at this point in my life now, where I've got, the gig, the day gig, the medieval times gig. It's like theater for me at this point is one of my main jobs, insofar as the roles I play at medieval times. So that scratches the creative itch, as it were. But when
Let's talk about that actually for medieval times. I'm curious because what you do there is something that I pursued at one time, and I still think it's really interesting. I always wonder, though, how much freedom do you really have with that role? Are you able, now that you've been doing it for some years, do you get away with more? What's fun with you about it? What's still fun about it, I should say?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Because in some roles, you do. It all depends on the venue. For specifically medieval times, um, we're pretty much encouraged by the national show director and our show director, Camden, to be very true to the script, very tight to the script. It's written in a particular way, and it has specific beats and rhythms to it that drive the action forward to get it up to it. So in some different dinner theater roles I've played in the past, we had all kinds of freedom to be able to mess around and enjoy it and play. The thing for me in doing a long running show, which I've done a lot of most recently in my career, are these long running gigs, is keeping it fresh. And that's where the craft comes in, more than just the emotion of acting or just the sense of getting into the character. You still do that, but the job is that when one of the other characters says something, that's the first time I've ever heard that. There is a tendency to get, I know these dance steps. I've done this dance a million times. So the joke I usually make is if people that I work with at medieval times, and they say, oh, okay. I go, I'm a tape. I'm basically pushing a tape because it is a dance. It's a vocal dance, it's a physical dance, but it is a dance. And you find that place that you feel like it's successful, or you get feedback that, yeah, that's successful. That's what I wanted that to be. So you try and replicate that. But yet for the audience, that's the first time I ever heard that. That's the first time he ever insulted me. That's the first time I ever saw somebody get hit by that.
That's an exciting perspective to have. I like that. I'm gonna remember that. Yeah, because that's the most important part, I would say, or maybe you would say,
is to react, not to act.
Well, the fact that every audience, for the most part, is brand new to the experience.
Right. Yeah.
So that's to always put it in their perspective is exciting, right?
Yeah.
Even if you've done it 1,000 times or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's just like in the fights too. You're not supposed to just act. You're supposed to have purpose behind the movement. Like you've never been cut by this guy before, so you're supposed to react. Like,
see, that it applies to that too, because even if you're bored with whatever fight you're doing for whatever reason, you can look at it that way. And yeah, it's like I'm gonna make sure that each one of these hits is just as hard
purposeful.
as purposeful.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like I am going for a head strike. Oh my god, he almost got me. You were talking about keeping strict to the script and stuff like that, and to the beats. But I do notice that like all the different MCs and Cedrics, and they have their own personality to the role that they bring. Especially with I remember in the old show, the MC had the spirits joke, right? It's and yours was my favorite because you would always make like the crowd like feel not really sorry for you, but empathize with your like your bad joke you had to make. And it was like I don't know, I found that very, very interesting that you were able to get like the crowd involved into it even.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. It's the connection with the audience. And in some of the other gigs I did prior to medieval times, there was more of that in the moment, read an audience, get a perception type of feel. But I think one of the things that I also try and remember about that, not just because the structure works and the mechanics of it work, and there's a movement to the evening that you want, or the performance that you want everyone to be able to feel, was something that another performer friend of mine had said. And I don't know if he made it up or if he just heard it from somebody and requoted it, but it was, at tonight's performance, there are going to be any number of people who have never seen a live performance. That'll be their first time seeing a live performance. There'll also be a number of people in that audience where it'll be their last time to ever see a live performance.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
They both deserve 100% commitment. So when people come and say, how big's the house tonight? How big's the crowd? How's the crowd? I'm like, they're all 1,500 to me. Because it's the same thing. And that's the other part of the tape that I joke about being a tape, but that commitment to each production, each performance of the same production, I think, in my mind anyway, just has to be at that level.
No, I agree for sure. Absolutely. You have to, like you said, like you have to give each guest their money's worth, if you would, right? Because it could be their first show, could be their last show. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to give a subpar performance, especially like in sports. They always say give 100% or give 110% all 4 quarters, not just the last quarter, not the first quarter, all 4. Like you have to play as hard as you can at the beginning, all the way through the end, especially at the end, because that's when you're the most exhausted. So that applies to the acting, to the fights and everything. It's just like this is always important, no matter how many people are there. Yeah, sure. When I was performing, I never cared about how big the show sizes were, because my job was always the same. It's like I'm doing the same thing regardless of how many people were there.
Absolutely.
And I'm always trying to improve myself and do the best that I can do. And as long as I did the best that I can do, I'm happy with the job that was done.
Sure.
If I took it easy one day, then I'd feel bad about it. I wouldn't be proud of my work. And I think that's important to do in
your dignity,
respect.
Right.
Yeah. Any job, you have to always try your hardest. And I feel like that's the main way to judge your performances, based on the last performance, right? Is that you can't necessarily compare yourself to others, because others have different experiences and routes to where they got, but you can always improve upon yourself. And as long as you're doing that, you're progressing, and that's what's important.
Right.
That's the way I view it.
And it reads. I think the audience appreciates our commitment. I think by the same token. And then outside of the acting and the emotional parts of it, what I've found is helpful is I also have to remember there's logistics to a performance, especially in a big place like medieval times. But even other theaters, it's the same thing. And by that I mean, so if it's a smaller crowd, they're not going to feel as comfortable either laughing or cheering or whatever out loud. So what you want to do is make them feel comfortable in being able to do that. But also, if somebody's screaming really big, the last thing you want to do is draw attention to them. Again, it's for the guest experience. But also, even things like there's a movement to a performance. And you might have noticed this sometime at different shows or whatever. But one of the early things I learned in particular this type of dinner theater, or this type of theater, is you have a capability and a chance to move the audience forward, to keep things going forward. So at the end of a blackout, for example, don't hold that more than a beat or two before you start speaking again. Otherwise, the whole evening feels choppy. There's too much pause here. There's too much pause here. It's sections as opposed to hopefully riding a wave all the way to the top of the evening, where they've been up and up and up and up and up. And every time they've seen something, guess what? Here comes something better. So at the end, not only did they get their money's worth, they got more than their money's worth, and walk out going, I didn't expect that to be that good. That's what you hope.
And that's quite the compliment, really. I don't think there's a better compliment than that, when you're pleased more than you expected to be.
Right.
So, okay, there's another thing that you do, and I'm not sure that I have the term properly, but you are also an officiant. Is that the proper way to say it? Or
a wedding officiator?
Totally. I've done.
I guess that's too broad a term. I don't know. What's the proper title?
I think it's officiant. I truly do, because it's not necessarily a minister, although I am a proud ordained minister of the Universal Life Church.
See, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah. Okay. So you are a minister, okay. So you have a church. Now, how did you get into that? Did that start with your religion or your religious beliefs in general, or did you what's the story behind you becoming a minister?
With me becoming a minister was Edward Michachek and Kirsten, whose name I could never spell. I could never pronounce her last name. Petrangeli, I believe it was. Said, we'd like you to officiate our wedding. And I went, okay, are you sure? She said, yeah, we really want you to. So I went, okay. Went online, boop, 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 boop. 30 seconds later, I was a minister of the Universal Life Church. And if I spent $30, I got, some marriage certificates and a book on how to do it. I had no idea. I'd seen civil ceremonies.
That's awesome.
But
that makes me want to do it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
You know what's weird? I thought, okay, there's a once in a lifetime experience. I'll put that in my little, memory bank and tell people, sure, I'm a minister. And then when I learned about it, there are people that do this for a living. They charge anywhere from $200 to $500 to just be a wedding officiant. Now, I'm sure they got better skills than me, but I made it through Edward's wedding and Kirsten's wedding okay.
I'll be honest. I was at Edward's wedding, and until now, I thought you'd been doing this for years.
Yeah, I thought you've done it before Edward's wedding as well.
So you carried yourself with as though you had years of experience. So maybe acting, maybe being an actor in some way, even in a legitimate way, can be a good.
I'm sure that it translates. It has to, because it's all about public speaking, and it's pretty much a script, right? That you've created yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and generally the way I do it is the lucky thing about this Universal Life Church. Which is free. It truly is free to become a minister. You can just get the extra accoutrement if you want to, but otherwise it's free. But they have all kinds of resources online. So they have different sample ceremonies of scripts, and you can kind of download them for free, and you can chop them up. So I went to them, for example, the first time I did it and said, okay, here's kind of the sections. Here's the greeting, here's the invocation, here's the this, here's the that. Here's a religious ceremony, here's a simple ceremony, here's a traditional ceremony, and just kind of, it's a big Word doc. It's like, put together your ceremony, I'll be happy to officiate it. Because in the end, what they're basically getting is, yeah, if anybody legal says, are they really married? It's like, yeah, that dude's a minister. So in all the states that recognize it, that's pretty much all they need. And so, yeah, it was just kind of putting together that with them until they had what they wanted. And that's the same thing I did with Carrie Ann and Anthony is that last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember. I think it was last year.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah. Well, how many weddings have you officiated then?
2.
Okay, so you're doing the 2. Are you going to do your daughters?
Huh? Oh, no.
Are you going to no?
No. It's funny. At my own second wedding, I guess probably at the first 2, I'm not a rock. I was blithering on the platform where we were getting married. It was like, my heart just kind of pours out my mouth, and it's like, oh, he's just pathetic.
No, I doubt anyone thinks that you're pathetic.
I probably would go, really? But both the weddings that I did officiate, at one point in the time, there was a lump that came up in my throat when I was talking about Carrie Ann and Anthony, when I was talking about Edward and Kirsten. It was just that sense of, okay, you got to keep this together. You're an officiant. You're not just a friend who's making a toast half in the bag. And then Sarah and Michael, I'm doing theirs in September. So they asked me to do it as well.
That's right, yeah.
But getting back to that point, people make money at it. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to charge anything for crying out loud. I'll give you a wedding card with a gift inside. That's the deal. I'm just standing up here doing something you asked me to do. You could have asked me to wax your car.
As long as you don't cry while you're waxing a car.
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
Yeah.
Do it, but don't cry while you're doing it. Yeah, I won't. I'll try.
Would you ever do that as as a side gig, and try and make a little extra money?
Wow. If I was eating cat food, maybe. If I was down to eating cat food and they said, well, I could hire myself out as an officiant. No, I do it when people ask.
Okay, so it's not like as fun as acting is for you. It's not
It's
something you would
different, you
search
know, and
for.
I would be concerned. I don't know. It's interesting because each one has been kind of different because it's obviously a different ceremony and they're different folks and the relationship between me and them is different. But I don't know if it turned into a gig. I'd never really thought about it. Again, if I was, if I need money, I'm not above doing it.
Yeah, right.
That's
So
making me think about it. That's for sure. I'm
yeah,
I'm, I'm
I
trying to
would
imagine
definitely.
myself in a suit with the way I look. What do I have to clean up about my image to be?
You could be the
nothing.
metal officiant.
Yeah, the metal. Maybe I could. That could be my
That
edge.
could
I'm
be
the
your
metal
gig.
officiant.
There
Yeah, why
you
not? I mean,
go. And number
it
two,
could work.
nothing. You'd look great. You look awesome. My God, look at me. I'm this
I love
little
I
house
love
with
that you just
lookalike.
looked it up online. That someone asked you to be their minister, and you're like, yeah.
Well,
Let
I
me
had
just
heard
Google
about
that.
it before that, of people that were
Uh,
becoming ministers online. I think somebody on late night did it. I think Steve Dahl did it back in the day. But yeah, it was just like, you can become a minister. So I was like, oh, well, go check that out. I'll be damned. I can. So yeah.
So, do you have to have like a certificate? Do you have to be like a minister to officiate, or what are the parameters that you have to
From
go
what I
in?
understand, and since all two of them have been in Illinois so far, I understand that a Universal Life Church minister's certificated, they could look it up and go, yeah, this guy is in fact registered, makes the marriage legal. In some states in the union, I won't mention any names, there's more craziness involved. So, as I understand it, but I haven't needed that. So I don't know, but yeah, it's totally legal.
Yeah.
It's the real deal.
Hmm.
But
And,
getting
it,
back
and
to,
it's free. It's pretty cool. You can just become a minister like that.
well, yeah. I mean, when I was a little kid and being inculcated and indoctrinated with the Catholic Church, I was an altar boy, and heck, I was head altar boy, which no lightning hit me. Okay,
head altar boy. What is a head altar boy?
I
What's
was
that
just
job
scheduling.
entail?
It was scheduling. It was
Ah,
pre opening up the ERA for altar servers. So at that point, it was just boys. So, but yeah, it does the scheduling and as far as what masses, who's doing what, blah 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 blah. It's basically class council. Um, but I have responsibility, and so I mean, we were devout Catholics in the great state of Georgia, which is kind of off-putting for most Georgians. Um, but yeah, and so we moved to Chicago, and I was the altar boy at that church, and then we went to a different one, and I was the altar boy at that church. And around the eighth grade, I looked around at our church campus, and they were constantly asking for money, as all churches do. Um, and I went, okay, they really need money. And they had this perfectly good, or it looked perfectly good, rectory where the priests lived. And they said, yeah, we need to replace it. So I said, okay, it was a little 2-bedroom house right on the facility. I thought, I understand that. They need to replace it. They put in a 6-flat. Now, they have visiting priests come to church from, different parishes and such. So they needed some place to put them up. But a 6-flat? I called it the Holy Hilton. And I really started to get disenchanted with a lot of the Catholic Church and pretty much quit going.
I lost my faith at a very young age. I think actually I was like 7 years old. In fact, when
Wow.
I lost my faith and I lost Santa Claus, everything that was essentially um, supposed to make me feel
Unverified.
unverified and it's supposed to make me feel warm and cozy. And I just have such a analytical mind. But I'm curious. So, are you still a practicing Catholic, or is that just a part of your youth, part of your childhood?
It was just a part of my childhood. I mean, and we were in Georgia, and for some reason they were like really in a hurry. So I'm not sure why, but in our second grade, we did our first communion. In our third grade, we did our confirmation, which normally waits till like 9 to 12 for that confirmation, but they just got it all of the way in 2 years. So it's meant a whole lot of catechism learning. But then when I got to Illinois, those people I was in school with were going through their first communion or their confirmation, and I'd just sit in the classroom with the teacher and shoot the breeze because I didn't have to go to all the stuff they were having to go to.
Yeah, you already
Oh.
knew it all. You were ahead of the curve.
Well, yeah, I was pre-qualified.
Mhm.
So you went to Catholic school?
I went to Catholic school,
Is that,
all 8
okay.
elementary years,
Oh wow.
Wow.
3 different schools. So when you're the new kid,
Did you have friends from like the public schools or other private schools to like compare and mix? Because we had some of that growing up myself.
nope, nope, just kids from my. Well, I take that back. Kids I went to school with, because again, I was the new kid for a lot of the time. But the kids I went to school with, they had friends that went to public school, so I get exposed to them.
Mm.
And for the most part, but it's not the same, if you're in the same school with them.
So
But no,
if
go
you
ahead.
go to Catholic school, all those kids still go? Do they all go to the same church as well, or are they
Usually,
affiliated with each other, the schools and the churches?
in my experience, yes, because the Catholic schools
Okay.
I went to were attached to Catholic churches. I'm not sure on standalones if they all go to the same parish or if they have different ones they go to. Um, Certainly in the Catholic high schools, they would be members of different parishes because that's more of a broad-based, not community-focused type of area. But yeah, no, I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. When I got divorced from my first marriage, they kind of threw me out of the club that was made for you and me. So, yeah, no more.
You get thrown out of church if you get a divorce.
At that time, it was excommunicable. My mother, when she was divorced from my father, which happened when I was 1.5, maybe. Yeah, she was excommunicated. Period. Stop. That's it. No divorce.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
I think it's easier now since I haven't been in the club for a long time. I don't know what the rule changes have been, but yeah, no.
It seems to be more laxed, yeah, because I have some friends who are Catholic, and they just sort of seem to I guess you could, for lack of a better term, get away with whatever they want in terms of sin and morality, with of course some exceptions. Obviously, they still have rules, but yeah, no, I mean, because I grew up Eastern Orthodox, and technically my family is for the most part Eastern Orthodox,
Mhm.
but that is that isn't comparable. I would say to Catholic. I mean, just by example, it's way more relaxed. I mean, we had a bar in the basement of the church, so New Year's Eve came around. You had It's like you don't go to the men in the family didn't go to the bar; they went to the church.
Yeah.
And priests could get married and have families
Yeah.
and things like that. So it was
What does it mean to be excommunicated exactly?
Basically, you're not allowed to participate in the sacraments. So taking communion, you can still come to church, but you're just kind of not allowed to participate in the sacraments.
And that's like the body of Christ and the blood
Yeah.
that the community. Okay.
Yep. But even that, I
Wow.
mean, when my son passed away before the daughters were born, we had him buried Catholic, and we went through the funeral, and the priest that was handling the funeral for us said, there'll be a funeral mass. Would you be taking communion? And I said, well, I haven't been to church in a really long time because I wasn't divorced yet, obviously, but I hadn't been to church in forever, and I had been not the best person on the planet. And he said, well, I'll hear your confession. And I said, you don't have time, Father. You're old. It's going to take a while. And he said, no, just go ahead and take communion if your heart's in the right place. And he was a tremendous priest. And I said, well, if I ever get excommunicated, he's same thing. If your heart's in the right place. So I think it depends a lot on your upbringing. I was Boston Catechism, and it was really strict. And again, it's all changed now, I'm sure. And from what Marko says, I think you're right. I think it's gotten a lot more relaxed. I think what they saw was people running from the exits for many number of reasons. Planned Parenthood, for example, or contraception, or oh my God, abortion or divorce. And they saw people sprinting for the exits and went, well, wait a minute, come on back. We won't do that anymore. We won't do this anymore. But as far as
That's
I'm
crazy
concerned,
that they're going to be so strict, and then they'll change their morality in order to keep more of a flock. Like that's crazy. That sounds very, well, it's hypocritical, right? Like
I think,
that's insane to me,
to
that
me,
you would have such an extreme view and then just change it because things aren't happening your way.
I think there's a whole lot of value in organized religion, regardless of the flavor you pick or what you're born into. But I think people get benefit from it. I think they get comfort from it. I think they get fellowship from it. And I'm totally for that, for the people that get
Right.
those
For
rewards from
sure.
it. But for me, in my perspective, organized religion has been founded on blood, money, and fear. And I'm very spiritual, but I don't necessarily want to be associated with that particular structure.
I can understand that. I see myself as that way. Is there anything though that you miss? A lot of times people miss aspects of the community that religion is actually. I think most religions, at least to me, seem really good at building welcoming communities. As far as the basic interactions between people that want to socialize, whatever. Some people don't need a big reason to get together. In other words, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, we all go to church. Fine, we go to church. It could be whatever. We all go to drag races. All right, we all go to drag races. Whatever. Is there anything like that you miss?
You know, it was weird for me, my particulars growing up and just history of the whole thing, because, like I said, my mom was divorced when I was a baby still. And we lived with my grandparents until we moved to Chicago, and it was just the two of us. So I went to school, she went to work, uh, and we didn't really socialize with a whole lot of people from church. It was pretty much you went to church because that was the rule. Um, but so yeah, I didn't really get any of that sense of fellowship for
Mm,
myself. I was blown away. I used to call it the theatrics. I was blown away by the pomp. I was blown away by the pageantry, the magnificent music, the soaring cathedrals, to the
yeah,
point where they would hand out the bulletin at the service, and I go, "Oh, it's the playbill. It's the program.
Yeah.
It's what we're going to do today." And it's interesting how a lot of the alternative religions began springing up somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s. Poplar Creek is a good example where it was originally in a movie theater on Northwest Highway in Palatine. It was the Poplar Creek Theater. And a woman I worked with at Fridays at the time took me there on a couple Sundays, and it was Godspell. It was Jesus Christ Superstar. It was a rock concert talking about Jesus. And it was like, okay, great. This
Okay.
is fun. They were getting people spiritually involved in a method that no longer related to them on organized religion. And now Poplar Creek is huge, gigantic.
it is. I was gonna say, yeah, that's that there has to be a documentary, or if there isn't, there should be one on their ascension, their growth.
So there as Poplar Creek, is it like one of the modern churches kind of thing? Is that what they just do, like
Yep.
like I can't even think of, I can vision it, but I can't think of how to
They're
articulate it.
I don't know for certain, but to me, they're from what I've seen and what I've gone to see, they're very evangelical in
Like
the way,
a
like
mega church.
yeah,
That's what I'm
it's
thinking of.
it's very, like you said, like alternative. It's rock and roll Jesus for sure.
Rock and roll
It
Jesus.
is, yeah.
But
You
it
know,
connects. And people get things from that. And I say fine.
right?
I really do. Um,
Yeah,
Bill Hybels was the guy that started it up. And I think, like a lot of people, as he got more rich and more powerful, the corruption just kind of snuck in, and he ended up having to be relieved of his duties. And later found out that he was involved in some scandals in the state of Michigan, and they basically said, "Yeah, you can't do business in the state of Michigan anymore." So,
mm,
everybody's got a skeleton. I've got a whole closet full, so I'm not throwing stuff
sure,
at God.
sure. Yeah. No, I think about that a lot myself. It's like it would be a bad idea if somebody just knocked on my door and gave me $20 million, for example. So I can't guarantee how often I'd be a good person. It's too corrupting. But
Right?
all right, so we've been talking for a while now. I had an idea. Well, let's start to wrap it up a little bit. But I wanted to bring across like some weird idea. So something I do that's kind of like a fun thought experiment is when we talk to people or when I interview someone, I think about how well their different occupations or vocations would combine at the same time. So do you think being an actor makes you a good pilot as well, or vice versa? Like because I find that for myself, at least as I go from job to job through life, there's just good things that I learn, right? And they combine,
Right. They
translate, they become like a soup in my
over.
mind. So sometimes, if I'm, I might be riding a horse, but I'm thinking like a surveyor, let's say, right? And I'm like measuring things while I'm on the back of a horse. And there's been moments like that. Do you do that? Are you that kind of person too?
One of the things I realized, I was in 25 years in mortgage banking systems management. And in mortgage banks, they didn't have a giant glass house computer room with just nobody but tech geeks. They basically had people that knew something about computers. I mean, I was there at the early computerization of mortgage banking. I'm talking 1982. So you kind of garnered a lot of knowledge and crammed it all in your head, and you became this little niche career guy that could do anything. So we were installing workstations, pulling cable, loading software, configuring applications, all this stuff, and then training users. So when I was working for Washington Mutual and I got right-sized out of my job, unless I wanted to move to California with the same amount of money, I said, can't do it. So I left mortgage banking and needed a new career and went back and thought, well, okay, what have I enjoyed in the business world? And it's been the training aspect. So I basically put myself in my own schooling and knowledge and gathering and started to become a trainer. And from
being a teacher,
acting perspective, that's awesome. And I knew a lot of actors who would also do training gigs. And it made a lot of sense because in the end, it's just communication and answering questions before they're asked. And kind of the same things an actor does. So I think there's been a good blend for me. As a pilot, probably not so much. Okay, folks, we're going down, but let me tell you a couple jokes.
I know some good jokes before we die. No, yeah, I was wondering how that would work out. So, okay, if I guess the last thing I have to ask you is, if you had to give good advice to save your life, what would it be?
If I had to save my own life?
Yes, a bolt of lightning is on its way down, and if you don't give the best advice you can think of right now, you're done.
Protect everyone.
Oh, you mean like to like a young person?
To add whatever.
Okay.
The best advice you have for the universe.
Protect everyone else you can. I'm trying to think of the best piece of advice. If the bolt is coming,
I'll send off the assassin.
Yeah, if the bolt's coming right between my eyes, I'm like, oh my God, there's people around here. Get the heck out of the way. Get out of here. If I'm doomed, especially, that's the best piece of advice I think I could offer anyone. Oh, outside of don't get hit by lightning. Yeah.
Yeah, so protect those around you, the ones that you care about. Sure. That's good advice.
Even if you don't care about them. I mean, as much as a, left wing, I will pound my little fist until the day I can no longer do that against controlling right wing, etc. Bottom line is, if they're standing next to me, I don't want them to get hit by lightning either.
Right. That's interesting. I did I love psychology tests. And I had one that basically told me that I'm like 80% more likely to like protect someone else over myself. And that's very strange. And I agree with that. Like, it's very strange,
because it goes against self-preservation.
It does.
Which is what you're kind of.
I should be programmed. I should be programmed to like value myself first. But I have that. My grandmother's that way, right? She'll give the shirt off her back. She'll take a bullet for a stranger, and I've always been that way. But I can never explain why that is. You know what I mean? Like, is it habitual? Is it genetic?
I wonder if it has to do with you seeing the value that others potentially have. Like they have a not necessarily a greater value than yourself, but you see the value. And
I do. Well, you know what? That may be it.
What you want to preserve.
Because I am the kind of person, and you've caught me doing this, where like I will rein my own ability to let others pass me. Yeah. First place doesn't matter to me, kind of
games,
thing.
You let other people win so that they can feel the joy of winning, but you try and do it sneakily, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Zach's been around me too much. He catches me. Yeah. Well, hey, Dave, thanks for doing this, man. I don't
I've never done a podcast.
have any other questions for you. No, yeah, shit, Zach and I could do this all day, so we have to stop at
I
some point.
understand.
I mean, that's how this started. We were having 3-4 hour conversations. I'm like, dude, why don't we just have a microphone running? This is ridiculous,
Yeah,
I like it.
At least for posterity.
Absolutely. So thank you.